One book, one extraordinary life. 48 chapters of saints, science, and the search for God.
I'm Kai.
And I'm Maya.
And this is our take on Autobiography of a Yogi, chapter by chapter.
Blood flows from her eyes. Her hands are outstretched in a gesture of desperate maternal pleading, and she's lying on a white bed in a state of absolute ecstasy, watching Christ carry the cross through the jeering crowd.
Chapter 39. Therese Newman, the Catholic Stigmatist. And hold on, wait, what? A woman in Bavaria who hasn't eaten for 12 years, carrying the literal wounds of Christ's crucifixion every single Friday?
Yeah, and Yogananda is there watching it happen. This is the moment when he's about to sail back to India. His guru, Sri Yukteswar, has called him home with a telepathic message that lands like a thunderbolt. 15 years in America, 15 years spreading Kriya Yoga, and suddenly everything stops. Here's the thing. Sri Yukteswar's voice doesn't come as words on a page. It comes right into his inner ear as he's meditating at Mount Washington. Traversing 10,000 miles in the twinkling of an eye, the message penetrates his being like a flash of lightning.
Okay, so this is not a gentle whisper. This is cosmic consciousness speaking directly through the guru-disciple connection. The voice says, "Return to India. I have waited for you patiently for 15 years. Soon I shall swim out of the body and onto the shining abode. Yogananda, come." And Yogananda knows immediately that it's real. The guru is telling him he's about to leave the physical body.
Not in some distant future, soon. And Yogananda understands right away what this means. It's 1935. He came to America in 1920. That's 15 years of establishing the mission, teaching, traveling, writing, and now his master is calling him home because the time is near.
So the first thing he does is tell a visiting disciple what happened, and this disciple is remarkable in his own way. Yogananda says his spiritual development under Kriya Yoga is so remarkable that he often calls him saint. And this is significant because, Yogananda remembers something Babaji prophesied, that America too would produce men and women of divine realization through the yogic path.
This disciple and a number of others, they're so moved by Yogananda's mission that they generously make donations for his travels. The financial problem is solved just like that. So he starts making arrangements to sail to Europe first, then to India. And there are busy weeks at Mount Washington, real logistical work. But also something else is happening. In March of 1935, he has the Self-Realization Fellowship officially chartered under the laws of the state of California as a non-profit corporation.
This is important because what he's doing is securing the institution. All public donations, all revenue from books, magazine, written courses, class tuition, everything goes to this educational organization. He's not building it for himself. He's building it as a vehicle for the teaching to endure.
And he tells his students before he leaves, "I shall be back. Never shall I forget America." But honestly, there's a poignancy to that because he doesn't know. He can't know that he's about to see his guru for the last time. He can't know what's about to happen.
At a farewell banquet in Los Angeles, he looks at his students' faces and thinks, "Lord, he who remembers thee as the soul giver will never lack the sweetness of friendship among mortals," because even in the moment of parting, his mind goes to God, to the ultimate source of everything.
And then the actual journey. He sails from New York on June 9th, 1935, in the Europa. With him are his secretary, Richard Wright, and an elderly lady named Eddie Bletch from Cincinnati, 2 students to help him on the journey. And the ocean voyage, it's peaceful. It's a contrast to the hurried weeks at Mount Washington. But the speed of modern boats has some regrettable features, he notes, which is kind of funny. The leisure doesn't last.
So they're in London. He speaks at Caxton Hall, introduced by Sir Francis' young husband. They visit Scotland, stay at Sir Harry Lauder's estate, all the diplomatic, social side of being an Indian spiritual teacher in the Western world. But here's the thing that stops him in his tracks. He wants to make a special pilgrimage to Bavaria.
Because he's read accounts of Therese Newman, and he thinks, this is my only chance. I have to see her. Even though his guru is calling him home, even though the timeline is compressed, something in him knows this is essential. This encounter is part of the journey.
So what does the book tell us about Therese before he even meets her? Born in 1898. At age 20, she had an accident and became blind and paralyzed, completely incapacitated. Her life seemed over.
Then in 1923, right at the time she's trying to recover, she prays to Saint Teresa, the little flower, and miraculously her sight returns. Her limbs are instantaneously healed. And then something even stranger happens. From 1923 onward, she stops eating.
Completely stops. No food, no drink except for one small consecrated wafer. That's it. The size of a coin, paper thin. And this goes on for 12 years by the time Yogananda meets her. 12 years. No stomach acid, no digestive system working. And she's not wasting away. She's healthy, rosy-cheeked, full of life.
And then in 1926, 3 years into this fasting, the stigmata appears. On her head, her breast, her hands, her feet. The sacred wounds of Christ. Every Friday thereafter, from Thursday midnight until Friday afternoon at 1 o'clock, she passes through the Passion. Her wounds open and bleed. She loses 10 pounds in that single day.
Wait, she loses 10 pounds? She only weighs 121 to begin with, so that's almost 10% of her body weight bleeding out every Friday. And she does this willingly. She looks forward to it. The book says she looks forward joyously to these weekly visions of her Lord.
And there's something the book mentions that's really striking. During her trance, she speaks languages she doesn't ordinarily know. She speaks Aramaic, which scholars recognize as ancient Aramaic, Hebrew, Greek, languages that she couldn't possibly have learned in a small Bavarian village.
Because consciousness isn't limited to what the brain has learned. When you're in a state of true communion with the divine, other dimensions open up. Other knowing becomes available. It's not mystical mumbo-jumbo. It's a direct perception of what's actually real.
So when Yogananda finally arrives at the village of Connersrite on July 16th, he's got this anticipation. This is a saint. And in his experience, whether in East or West, there's something unmistakable about meeting genuine holiness. But then the cottage is closed. The neighbors don't know where she is. Rain begins to fall. His companions suggest they leave.
And this is so Yogananda. He says no. Stubbornly, he sits in the car in the rain and waits. Lord, he sighs, why didst thou leave me here if she has disappeared? And 2 hours later, an English-speaking man appears by the car out of the rain and gives him the information he needs. Therese is visiting Professor Wurz, 80 miles away.
So the next morning they motor to Eichstätt, narrow cobblestone streets. Dr. Wurz greets them cordially and sends word to Therese that there are visitors. And the message comes back that's so beautiful. Though the bishop has asked me to see no one without his permission, I will receive the man of God from India.
The man of God from India, because she recognizes it, she feels it. And Yogananda goes upstairs to meet her, and she enters the sitting room radiating an aura of peace and joy. She's wearing a black gown and spotless white headdress. She's 37 years old, but she seems much younger. Healthy, well-formed, rosy-cheeked, cheerful. This is the saint that does not eat.
And they greet each other with this silent communion, each knowing the other to be a lover of God. And then Yogananda asks the direct question, because he wants to hear it from her own lips. Don't you eat anything?
And she says, no, except a consecrated rice flour wafer, once every morning at 6 o'clock. And when he asks how large it is, she says it's paper thin, the size of a small coin. And she adds something that's really significant. If the wafer is unconsecrated, she's unable to swallow it.
Because it's not about the calories or the protein. It's not about nutrition at all. It's about the consciousness, the blessing, the sanctification of the wafer. The material form is just a vehicle. The actual nourishment is spiritual.
And Yogananda says, certainly you could not have lived on that for 12 whole years? And her answer is just 4 words. I live by God's light. How simple her reply, the text says. How Einsteinian.
Because she's confirming what the deepest physics now suggests, that energy and matter are interchangeable, that consciousness can sustain the body without material food, that the universe isn't fundamentally made of stuff, it's made of light, of vibration, of divine energy.
And Yogananda immediately understands. He says to her, I see you realize that energy flows to your body from the ether, sun, and air. And she's so relieved, so happy. She smiles and says, I am so happy to know you understand how I live. Because here's a spiritual master from the East, someone trained in yoga and prana and the science of breath, and he immediately comprehends what she's doing.
So Yogananda explains to her a line from the Bible. Your sacred life is a daily demonstration of the truth uttered by Christ. Man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of God. And again, she shows joy at this explanation, because now the teaching is complete. She's living proof of that scripture.
And she tells him something that reveals her humility. When he asks if she can teach others how to live without food, she appears shocked. I cannot do that. God does not wish it. Because her gift is unique to her. It's not meant to be a formula or a technique passed on to others.
That's the spiritual maturity right there. She could present herself as a teacher, could build an organization around her fasting, could make a big thing of it. But she understands that her fasting is her own personal expression of devotion, not a universal teaching.
And as they're talking, Yogananda notices her hands. He sees the stigmata wounds, small, square, freshly healed wounds on each palm, and on the back of each hand, smaller, crescent-shaped wounds that go straight through. And something strikes him about those wounds. The shape reminds him of the large square iron nails with crescent-tipped ends that are still used in the Orient.
Which is interesting because he's saying, maybe these aren't psychological wounds or symbolic manifestations. Maybe these are actual physical wounds that match the exact specifications of crucifixion nails from the historical period of Christ.
And Therese tells him about her weekly trances.
As a helpless onlooker, I observed the whole Passion of Christ, from Thursday midnight until Friday afternoon at 1 o'clock. Her wounds open and bleed. She loses 10 pounds from her normal 121-pound weight. She's suffering intensely, but she looks forward joyously to these visions of her Lord. There's no masochism there. There's only love.
And then Professor Wirtz, who's present as the interpreter, shares some of his own observations. He travels with Therese sometimes, weeks-long sightseeing trips through Germany. And while he and others are eating 3 meals a day, Therese eats nothing. She's fresh as a rose, untouched by the fatigue that exhausts the rest of them.
As they get hungry and hunt for wayside inns, she laughs merrily. Can you imagine? The spiritual joy of it, the absolute freedom from the prison of hunger and need. And the professor adds physiological details, because this has been scientifically observed. Because Therese takes no food, her stomach has shrunk. She has no excretions, but her perspiration glands function normally. Her skin is always soft and firm.
It's like her body has adapted to a completely different mode of operation. The mechanisms of gross digestion have shut down, but the mechanisms of life itself are still functioning perfectly, because life itself doesn't come from food. Life comes from God.
So, at the time of parting, Yogananda asks if he can be present at one of her trances, and Therese graciously invites him to come to Connersreuth next Friday. She says the bishop will give him a permit, and she tells him, "I am very happy you sought me out in Eichstätt."
And then there's this beautiful detail. Mr. Wright turns on the automobile radio, and Therese examines it with little enthusiastic chuckles, like a child discovering something wonderful, and a crowd of youngsters gathers around, so she retreats into the house and peeks out the window, waving her hand like a child.
There's innocence there, purity. She's not trying to be holy or impressive. She's just genuinely delighted by things, by radio waves, by young people, by the mystery of existence.
From a conversation the next day with 2 of Therese's brothers, Ferdinand and another, Yogananda learns more details. Therese sleeps only 1 or 2 hours a night. Despite the many wounds in her body, she's active and full of energy. She loves birds, she looks after an aquarium of fish, she works in her garden.
And this is significant because she's not wasting away. She's not a tortured, suffering saint locked away from the world. She's vital, she's engaged. She has hobbies and interests and joy in living.
Her brother Ferdinand explains something really profound. Therese has the power, through prayer, to work out on her own body the ailments of others. The saint's abstinence from food actually dates from a time when she prayed that the throat disease of a young man preparing to enter holy orders be transferred to her own throat.
So she took the disease into her body and then healed both of them. She bore the suffering so someone else wouldn't have to. And that becomes her spiritual practice. She becomes a woman who takes on the burdens of others through pure love.
On Thursday afternoon, Yogananda's party drives to the home of the bishop. The bishop looks at Yogananda's long hair with some surprise, but he readily writes out the necessary permit. No fee, just a rule to protect Therese from casual tourists, who used to flock on Fridays by the thousands.
So Friday morning, about 9:30, they arrive in Connersreuth. There's about 20 visitors, all with permits, all there to witness the trance. And Yogananda notices that Therese's cottage has a special glass-roofed section to afford her plenty of light. The doors are open in hospitable cheer.
And here's something Yogananda reflects on. Therese had passed his first test at the professor's house by her intuitive knowledge that he wanted to see her for spiritual reasons, not just curiosity. But now comes the second test. Just before he goes upstairs to her room, just before he enters her sacred space, he puts himself into a yogic trance state.
He deliberately aligns his consciousness with hers. He wants to be one with her in telepathic and televisic rapport. He's not just going to observe from the outside. He's going to enter into her experience. He's going to see what she's seeing.
And when he enters the chamber, he's awestruck at a strange and most frightful spectacle. Blood flows thinly and continuously in an inch-wide stream from Therese's lower eyelids. Her gaze is focused upward on the spiritual eye, the third eye, in the center of the forehead. The cloth around her head is drenched in blood from the crown of thorns wounds. Her white garment is splotched with blood from the wound in her side, at the exact spot where a soldier's spear pierced Christ's body all those centuries ago.
Therese's hands are extended in that maternal gesture. Her face wears an expression both tortured and divine. She appears thinner, changed. Murmuring words in a foreign tongue, she speaks with quivering lips to persons invisible only to her inner sight.
And because Yogananda is in attunement with her, he begins to see the scenes of her vision. She's watching Jesus as he carries the cross through the jeering multitude, and suddenly she lifts her head in consternation. The Lord has fallen under the cruel weight of it. The vision disappears. In the exhaustion of fervent pity, Therese sinks helly against her pillow.
And at that exact moment, Yogananda hears a loud thud behind him. He turns his head and sees two men carrying out a prostrate body. But because he's coming out of the deep superconscious state, he doesn't immediately recognize who it is. He fixes his eyes back on Therese's face, deathly pale under the rivulets of blood, but now calm, radiating purity and holiness.
And then he glances behind him later and sees Mr. Wright standing with his hand against his cheek, and blood is trickling from it. So Yogananda asks, "Dick, were you the one who fell?" And Mr. Wright says, "Yes, I fainted at the terrifying spectacle."
And Yogananda is consoling. He says, well, you are brave to return and look upon the sight again. And that's not patronizing. That's actually recognizing the spiritual strength required to witness genuine holiness without turning away, to let it crack you open.
Yogananda and Mr. Wright silently bid farewell to Therese and leave her sacred presence, because there are other pilgrims waiting patiently in line, and the teaching moment is complete.
The following day, the group drives south, through Germany, Holland, France, the Swiss Alps. They stop in Assisi to honor St. Francis, the apostle of humility, and then they tour Greece. They see the Athenian temples, they visit the prison where the gentle Socrates drank his death potion. The Greeks wrought their very fancies in alabaster everywhere, Yogananda observes with admiration.
And then they take ship over the sunny Mediterranean and disembark in Palestine. Wandering through the Holy Land, Yogananda becomes more than ever convinced of the value of pilgrimage. The Spirit of Christ is all-pervasive there. He walks reverently by Christ's side at Bethlehem, at Gethsemane, at Calvary, at the Holy Mount of Olives, by the River Jordan, by the Sea of Galilee.
They visit the birth manger, Joseph's carpenter shop, the tomb of Lazarus, the house of Martha and Mary, the hall of the Last Supper. Scene by scene, the divine drama that Christ once played for the ages unfolds before him.
And I think what's happening here is that Yogananda is receiving something essential. He's just witnessed a woman in Bavaria bearing Christ's wounds, and now he's walking in the very places where Christ walked. And he understands that it's all one continuous story. The teaching never stopped. Christ is still speaking. Saints are still manifesting his reality in their own bodies.
On to Egypt, with Cairo and the ancient pyramids. Then a boat down the narrow Red Sea, over the vasty Arabian Sea. And finally, lo, India. The journey is complete.
And here's the thing about the whole arc of this chapter. Yogananda is being called home by his guru. The guru says, "I'm about to leave the body." The message is urgent. But instead of rushing straight back, Yogananda takes weeks to witness something crucial, to see with his own eyes that the spiritual phenomena he's devoted his life to are not unique to India.
That the yogic science of prana, the understanding that consciousness can sustain the body without food, that Christ consciousness itself can appear in different times, different places, different traditions, it's all real. It's all one truth manifesting infinitely.
When he finally arrives in India and sits with Sri Yukteswar, he brings back the entire world's spiritual wealth. He's seen it himself. He's witnessed it. He's not repeating teachings from books. He's integrated them into the fiber of his being.
Yeah. And that's what makes him qualified when he finally inherits the responsibility of spreading the teaching to speak from the authority of direct experience.
Next time, the homecoming, the moment he's been traveling toward, the moment his guru has been waiting for.
See you next time.